Hello, my good friends. How are you today? May God bless you all. I will not introduce anything. You guys watch the video and feel it, then let's evaluate together. The mirror in Nia Carter's cramped Atlanta apartment wasn't doing her any favors tonight. She stood there, smoothing the deep burgundy gown that hugged her curves like it was made for her, though it was borrowed from her best friend Keisha's closet. The fabric shimmered under the dim light of her bedroom, catching the glow of a single bulb dangling from the ceiling. Nia tilted her head, her natural curls bouncing slightly, and sighed. She looked good. Damn good, if she was being honest, but she felt like an imposter. A yoga teacher from Little 5 Points didn't belong at some fancy charity gala downtown, rubbing elbows with Atlanta's elite. Yet here she was, teetering on heels she could barely walk in, about to step into a world that felt as foreign as the moon. "Girl, you're overthinking it." Keisha's voice rang out from the living room, where she was sprawled on Nia's thrift store couch, scrolling through her phone. Keisha Brooks, with her sharp wit and bolder-than-life personality, had been Nia's ride or die since high school. As a freelance journalist, Keisha had a knack for sniffing out opportunities, and tonight's gala was her latest scheme. It's free food, live music, and a chance to forget your stress for 5 seconds. You're going. Nia poked her head out of the bedroom, one eyebrow raised. "You mean you're going, and I'm just the +1 you dragged along?" Keisha grinned, her braids swinging as she sat up. "Exactly. Now quit fussing and let's roll. We're already late." Nia glanced back at the mirror, her reflection staring back with a mix of nerves and defiance. Life had been heavy lately. Her yoga studio, Soulflow, was barely breaking even, with bills piling up faster than she could teach classes. Her ex, Marcus, had left her heart bruised after a breakup that still stung. His words, "You're too much, Nia," echoing in her mind on bad days. And bad days were plenty. She was burned out, stretched thin, and honestly a little lost. Maybe Keisha was right. One night of sparkle and champagne couldn't hurt. She grabbed her clutch, squared her shoulders, and muttered, "Fine, let's do this." The gala was held at the Fox Theater, a historic Atlanta landmark that oozed old-school glamour. As Nia and Keisha stepped inside, the air buzzed with the hum of wealth, crystal chandeliers casting golden light, the clink of glasses, and the low pulse of a jazz band playing Ella Fitzgerald. Women in sequined gowns floated by, their laughter mingling with the deep voices of men in tuxedos. The crowd was a mix of Atlanta's old money and new tech moguls, all gathered to bid on silent auction items for some cause Nia hadn't bothered to read about. She smoothed her dress again, feeling every eye in the room. As a black woman in a space like this, she was used to standing out. But tonight, the weight of those glances felt heavier. "Relax," Keisha whispered, nudging her toward the bar. "You look like a queen. Own it." Nia forced a smile, her heels clicking on the marble floor. "Easy for you to say. You live for this chaos." Keisha laughed, her gold hoop earrings catching the light. "True. Now grab a drink and loosen up. I'm gonna scope out the auction table. Might snag a spa day." She winked and disappeared into the crowd, leaving Nia alone with her thoughts and a flute of champagne she'd snagged from a passing waiter. The bubbles tickled her throat as she sipped, scanning the room. That's when she saw him. He was standing near the edge of the dance floor, tall and broad-shouldered, his black tuxedo tailored to perfection. A simple black mask covered half his face, part of the gala's masquerade theme, but it only made him more striking. His dark hair was slightly tousled, and there was a quiet confidence in the way he held himself. Not arrogant, but like he knew exactly who he was. He was talking to a group of suits, nodding politely, but his eyes kept drifting, as if searching for something. Or someone. Their gazes locked. Nia's breath caught, her fingers tightening around the champagne flute. His eyes, even behind the mask, were piercing, crinkling slightly as if he was smiling. She looked away, heat creeping up her neck. but when she glanced back, he was moving toward her, cutting through the crowd with purpose. "Trouble," Keisha's voice hissed in her ear, suddenly back at her side. "That guy's trouble in the best way. Bet he's loaded." "Keisha, hush," Nia muttered, but her friend was already grinning like a cat who'd caught a canary. The man stopped in front of her, close enough that she caught the faint scent of his cologne, something woody and warm. Up close, he was even more striking, his jaw sharp, his lips curved in a half-smile that made her stomach flip. "You look like you're hiding," he said, his voice low and smooth, with a hint of a drawl she couldn't place. "Mind if I join you?" Nia's heart did a little stutter. She wasn't used to men like this, men who looked like they walked out of a magazine and talked like they knew they could charm the socks off anyone. But there was something in his eyes, a flicker of curiosity, that made her relax. "Depends," she said, tilting her chin up. "You got a name, or are we sticking with mystery guy?" He chuckled, the sound warm and genuine. "Let's go with just a guest for now. And you?" "Nia," she said, leaving it at that. No last name, no details. Tonight she wanted to be someone else, someone who didn't carry the weight of bills and heartbreak. "Nia," he repeated, like he was tasting the word. "Want to dance? Or are you committed to holding up this bar all night?" She hesitated, glancing at the dance floor where couples swayed to a slow jazz number. Her heels were already killing her, and she hadn't danced in years. But the way he was looking at her, like she was the only person in the room, made her want to say yes. "All right," she said, setting her glass down. "But if I trip, you're catching me." "Deal," he said, offering his hand. His palm was warm against hers, his grip firm but gentle as he led her to the floor. The band shifted to a sultry rendition of At Last, and he pulled her close, one hand resting lightly on her waist. Nia's breath hitched at the contact, the heat of his touch seeping through the thin fabric of her dress. They moved together, not perfectly. She wobbled once, and he steadied her with a grin, but effortlessly, like they'd done this 100 times. She could feel the strength in his frame, the way his body seemed to anticipate her every step. "You're not bad at this," she said, her voice teasing to mask the way her heart was racing. "You sound surprised," he shot back, his eyes crinkling behind the mask. "I've had practice. Though I gotta say, you're making it hard to focus." She laughed, the sound bubbling up unexpectedly. "Flirt much?" "Only when it's worth it," he said, and the way his voice dropped sent a shiver down her, constantly spinning her around, his hand sliding up her back, the heat of him burning through her dress. They danced through 2 more songs, the world narrowing to just them. The champagne kept flowing, loosening her nerves, and their banter grew easier, sharper. He teased her about her wobbly heels. She fired back about his fancy boy tucks. It was the kind of effortless chemistry she hadn't felt in years, maybe ever. Keisha reappeared at one point, waggling her eyebrows, but Nia waved her off, too caught up in the moment. The night blurred into a haze of music, laughter, and heat. She didn't know who suggested leaving the gala, but one minute they were in the crowded ballroom, and the next they were in the quiet hum of an elevator, his hand brushing hers. The air between them crackled, heavy with unspoken want. When the doors opened, he led her down a hallway to a hotel room upstairs, the kind of suite that screamed money. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a king-sized bed, the city lights glittering below. Inside, the masks came off. Without his, he was even more striking. Sharp cheekbones, dark eyes that seemed to see right through her, and a grin that made her knees weak. She didn't ask his name, and he didn't offer. It was like they'd made a silent pact to keep this moment separate from reality, a bubble of anonymity they both craved. "You sure about this?" he asked, his voice soft but rough around the edges as he stepped closer. His jacket was already on the floor, his shirt unbuttoned just enough to show a sliver of tanned skin. Nia's pulse pounded, her body humming with a reckless energy she hadn't felt in years. She was tired of playing it safe, of carrying the weight of her life. Tonight, she wanted to feel alive. "Yeah," she said, her voice steady. "I'm sure." What followed was a whirlwind of touch and heat, a dance far more intimate than the one on the floor below. His hands were everywhere, strong, deliberate, but tender in a way that caught her off guard. He kissed her like he was starving for her, lips trailing fire down her neck, her collarbone. She arched into him, her fingers digging into his shoulders, the world dissolving into sensation. The burgundy dress hit the floor, followed by his shirt, their laughter mingling with gasps. It was messy, clumsy at times. She tripped over her own heels, and he caught her, both of them laughing like kids. But it was perfect. When they collapsed onto the bed, tangled in each other, Nia felt something shift inside her, like a knot loosening. For the first time in months, she wasn't thinking about tomorrow. Hours later, they fell asleep, the sheets a mess, the city glowing through the window. Nia drifted off with his arm draped over her, his breath warm against her neck, the weight of the world gone for just one night. Morning came too fast. Nia woke to a pounding headache and a jolt of panic. The bed was empty, the space beside her cool. She sat up, clutching the sheet, her heart sinking. He was gone. No note, no number, just nothing. Then she spotted it on the nightstand. A silver bracelet, simple but elegant, with intricate carvings she couldn't quite make out. Next to it, a scrap of hotel stationery with a single line in messy scrawl. "Thanks for the dance." She ran her fingers over the bracelet, half embarrassed, half amused. What had she done? Last night felt like a dream, vivid but already fading. She slipped the bracelet onto her wrist, its weight grounding her, and got dressed in a hurry, her dress wrinkled, one heel missing its mate. The walk of shame back to her apartment was a blur of regret and relief. She'd let go, just for a night, and it had been worth it. Or so she told herself. Keisha was waiting when she got home, sprawled on the couch with a mug of coffee and a grin that could light up the city. "Spill it, Carter," she demanded. Who was Mr. Tall, dark, and masked? Nia flopped onto the couch, laughing despite herself. "Nobody," she said, brushing it off. "Just a crazy story for the books." But as she twisted the bracelet on her wrist, a strange feeling settled in her chest. That night wasn't just a story. It was something more, something she couldn't name yet. She went back to her yoga classes, her tiny apartment, her normal life. The bracelet, a quirky reminder of the wildest night she'd ever had. She didn't know it then, but that night had planted a seed, one that would grow into something she couldn't ignore. Across town, Jaxon Reed was waking up in his penthouse, a faint smile on his face, already trying to shake the memory of a woman who'd gotten under his skin. They were both wrong to think it was over. If you're hooked on Nia and Jaxon's electric night and dying to know what's next, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below. Tell me, what do you think is coming for these two? Trust me, this is just the start of a wild ride. Nia Carter's yoga studio, Soul Flow, was her sanctuary, tucked in the heart of Atlanta's Little 5 Points, where murals splashed color on brick walls and the air smelled of coffee and patchouli. The space was small but alive, with woven tapestries hanging on the walls, a cluster of candles flickering on a low table, and a Bluetooth speaker pumping Afrobeat rhythms that made her classes feel like a celebration. On a humid morning, Nia stood at the front of the room, guiding a dozen students through a sun salutation, her voice steady despite the chaos swirling in her mind. Breathe in, lift your heart, let it go on the exhale. Her students mirrored her movements, their mats spread across the hardwood floor, but Nia's focus wavered. The silver bracelet on her wrist caught the light as she flowed into Downward Dog, a quiet reminder of that reckless night at the Fox Theater Gala 3 months ago. She'd told herself it was a one-off, a spark of madness she'd never chase again. But the memory of him, the masked stranger with the warm laugh and electric touch, lingered like a song she couldn't shake. She wore the bracelet every day, calling it her lucky charm when Keisha teased her, but deep down, it felt like more. A tether to something she didn't understand. "All right, y'all, Savasana," Nia said, forcing herself back to the present. The class settled onto their mats, eyes closed, as she dimmed the lights and let the music fade to a soft hum. She sat cross-legged at the front, trying to find her own calm, but her thoughts were a tangle. The studio was bleeding money, rent was due, the AC was on its last legs, and she'd had to cancel a class last week to fix a busted pipe. On top of that, Marcus, her ex, had texted her out of the blue, stirring up old wounds. "You're too much, Nia." His words still cut. A reminder of how he'd chipped away at her confidence, dismissing her passion for yoga, her blackness, her everything. She pushed the thought away, but it left a hollow ache. After class, Nia was rolling up mats when Keisha Brooks burst through the door, her braids swinging, a grin splitting her face. "Nia Carter, I just saved your ass," she announced, holding up her phone like it was a trophy. Nia raised an eyebrow, wiping sweat from her brow. "Save me how? You paying my rent?" "Better." Keisha flopped onto a beanbag in the corner, her gold hoop earrings glinting. "I scored us a gig in Miami. Corporate wellness workshop for some big-shot tech company, Apex Innovations. They want a yoga session, and I told them you're the best in the game. Pays enough to keep this place running for months." Nia paused, a mat half rolled in her hands. Miami was a long way from Atlanta, and the idea of teaching a bunch of suits in a boardroom sounded like her personal nightmare. "Keisha, I'm swamped. I can't just drop everything for a weekend trip." Keisha leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "Swamped with what? Stress? Bills? Girl, this is a lifeline. Free hotel, good coffee, and a chance to network. You need this, Nia. Soulflow needs this." Nia sighed, knowing Keisha was right. The studio was her dream, built from years of teaching in community centers and saving every penny. She couldn't let it slip away. "Fine," she said, tossing the mat aside. "But if I'm stuck with a room full of tech bros who'd rather check their emails than stretch, I'm blaming you." Keisha clapped her hands, victorious. "That's my girl. Pack your leggings. We're headed to the big leagues." Across the state line, in Miami's glittering downtown, Jackson Reed sat at the head of a glass conference table, his jaw tight as he listened to a quarterly report. The Apex Innovations headquarters was a sleek tower of steel and glass, its open-plan offices buzzing with coders and designers, all working to keep the company at the top of the tech world. Jackson, at 32, was the youngest CEO in Apex's history, a prodigy who'd turned his family's modest software firm into a global powerhouse. But success came with a price. The boardroom was a battlefield, and today, his aunt, Vivian Caldwell, was sharpening her knives. "We need to diversify our portfolio," Vivian said, her voice crisp, her designer suit as sharp as her stare. She was in her late 50s, with silver-streaked hair and a presence that could silence a room. "Your obsession with AI is blinding you, Jackson. We're missing opportunities." Jackson leaned back, his tailored blazer straining slightly over his broad shoulders. "Our AI division brought in 60% of last quarter's revenue, Vivian. I'm not betting against a winning horse." The board murmured, some nodding, others glancing at Vivian, who smiled thinly. Jackson knew that smile. It meant trouble. Vivian had been a thorn in his side since his father died, leaving Jackson the reins of Apex. She wanted control, always had, and her son Malik was her eager pawn. Jaxon trusted his team, but family was another story. After the meeting, he retreated to his corner office, the Miami skyline sprawling beyond floor-to-ceiling windows. The view usually grounded him: turquoise water, swaying palms, the pulse of a city that never slept. But today, his mind was elsewhere. He poured a coffee, black, and let his thoughts drift to a night 3 months ago in Atlanta. A woman with a bright laugh, a burgundy dress, and eyes that saw right through him. He hadn't caught her name, hadn't wanted to break the spell of that night. It was a rare moment of freedom, no boardrooms, no expectations, just her. He shook his head, pushing the memory away. CEOs didn't chase strangers, but damn if he didn't wish he'd asked for her number. His assistant knocked, popping her head in. "Jaxon, the wellness workshop's tomorrow. You want to sit in? It's that yoga thing Vivian pushed for employee morale." Jaxon grimaced. Yoga wasn't his thing. Give him a boxing ring over a meditation circle any day, but he nodded. "Sure. Might as well see what Vivian's spending my budget on." The Apex Innovations campus in Miami was a far cry from Nia's cozy Atlanta studio. The lobby was all polished concrete and LED screens, with employees in blazers hustling past like they were on a mission to save the world. Nia felt like a fish out of water, hauling her yoga mats through the glass doors, her leggings and messy bun clashing with the corporate vibe. Keisha, in a chic jumpsuit, led the way, chatting about how this gig could open doors for both of them. "These folks are loaded," Keisha whispered, as they set up in a conference room with a view of Biscayne Bay. "Play your cards right, and you could be teaching private sessions for their execs," Nia snorted, arranging mats on the carpet. "I just want to get through this without someone asking me to namaste their stock portfolio." The room filled with a dozen employees, most looking skeptical or bored, their smartwatches blinking with notifications. Nia plastered on a smile, her bracelet glinting as she started the session. "All right, y'all, let's shake off the office stress. Find a mat, take a deep breath, and we'll start with a warrior pose." She moved through the class, adjusting postures and keeping her voice calm, but her nerves were on edge. These weren't her usual students, who came to Soulflow for community and healing. These were people who saw yoga as a checkbox on their wellness plan. Halfway through, she was demonstrating a tree pose when the door swung open and her world tilted. He walked in, tall, broad-shouldered, in a crisp navy suit that hugged his frame. His dark hair was neatly combed, his jaw clean-shaven, but those eyes... Nia froze, her balance wobbling. It was him, the man from the gala. No mask this time, but she'd know that face anywhere. The sharp cheekbones, the half-smile that made her stomach flip. He stopped, his gaze locking on hers, and for a split second, the room vanished. She saw recognition flicker in his eyes, a spark of something that mirrored her own shock. "Mr. Reed," one of the employees said, snapping Nia back to reality. "Didn't expect you to join us." "Thought I'd check it out," he said, his voice smooth, but his eyes never left Nia. "Carry on." Nia's cheeks burned as she turned back to the class, her heart hammering. Mr. Reed. So that was his name. Jaxon Reed, CEO of Apex Innovations, if the whispers around the room were any indication. She fumbled through the next pose, her usual flow replaced by a clumsy stutter. Let's move into bridge pose. Yeah, bridge." Someone snickered, and she wanted to melt into the floor. Jaxon didn't join the class, just leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. She stole glances, catching the way his suit jacket stretched over his shoulders, the memory of his hands on her waist flashing through her mind. Did he recognize her? Did he remember? The thought was both a thrill and a terror. She'd been a nobody that night, a woman in a borrowed dress, Now she was just a yoga teacher in his corporate kingdom. When the session ended, the employees filed out, muttering about lunch plans. Nia busied herself with rolling mats, avoiding Jackson's gaze, but he approached, his polished shoes clicking on the floor. "Nice class," he said, his tone casual, but laced with something deeper. "You've got a way of making people listen." "Thanks," she said, keeping her eyes on the mats, her voice tighter than she meant. "Just doing my job." He stepped closer, and she caught that same woody cologne from the gala, stirring memories she'd tried to bury. "That bracelet," he said, nodding at her wrist. "It's unique. Where'd you get it?" Her stomach twisted. She forced a laugh, tugging her sleeve over the silver. "Oh, just a random find. No big deal." His eyes narrowed slightly, like he wasn't buying it, but he didn't push. Instead, he extended a hand. "Jackson Reed. Good to meet you." "Nia Carter," she said, her hand meeting his. His grip was firm, warm, and the brief contact sent a jolt through her, like the first note of a song she couldn't forget. She pulled back, her cheeks hot, and muttered, "Gotta pack up. Thanks for stopping by." He lingered, like he wanted to say more, but another figure appeared in the doorway, Vivian Caldwell. She was all sharp angles and cold elegance, her silver hair pulled into a tight bun, her eyes scanning Nia like a hawk sizing up prey. "Jackson, we need you in the boardroom," she said, her voice clipped. But her gaze landed on Nia's bracelet, and for a split second, her face paled. "Coming," Jackson said, giving Nia one last look before turning away. Vivian's stare lingered, her lips pursing, and Nia felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. As they left, Keisha sidled up, whispering, "Okay, what was that? Mr. CEO was giving you hard eyes, and that lady looked like she wanted to eat you." Nia shook her head, her pulse still racing. "I don't know, Keisha, but I got a bad feeling about this." Across the building, Vivian slipped into her office, her heels clicking on the marble floor. She shut the door, her hands trembling as she dialed Malik. "We've got a problem," she hissed when he answered. "That yoga instructor. She's wearing a Horizon Enterprises bracelet, the one I saw on their kid 20 years ago. Malik's laugh crackled through the phone. "What, you think some random chick's here to take us down? Mom, chill." Vivian's voice hardened. "This isn't a joke, Malik. If she's who I think she is, she could unravel everything. We need to know who she is, and fast." Back in the conference room, Nia packed her gear, the bracelet heavy on her wrist. Jackson's face, Vivian's stare, the weight of that night 3 months ago. It all swirled in her mind, a storm she couldn't outrun. She'd come to Miami for a paycheck, not a reckoning. But as she followed Keisha out into the Miami heat, she couldn't shake the feeling that her past was catching up, and it wasn't letting go. Nia Carter sat in the passenger seat of Keisha's rental car, the Miami skyline blurring past as they drove toward a quirky little shop in Coconut Grove. The bracelet on her wrist felt heavier than ever, its silver carvings catching the late afternoon sun. She hadn't slept well since the yoga workshop at Apex Innovations 2 days ago, her mind replaying Jackson Reed's piercing gaze and Vivian Caldwell's icy stare. But it wasn't just them. Strange dreams had started creeping in, flashes of a big house with tall windows, a woman's voice humming a lullaby, and the bracelet glowing like it was alive. They felt too real to be random, and Nia was starting to wonder if she was losing it. "Marla Tate's gonna love you," Keisha said, her hands loose on the steering wheel, a grin tugging at her lips. "She's a little out there, but she knows things. Used to work for some big company way back. If anyone can tell you about that bracelet, it's her." Nia nodded, twisting the bracelet absently. Keisha had mentioned Marla before, a friend of a friend who ran a metaphysical shop and dabbled in everything from tarot to family history. Nia wasn't sure she believed in that stuff. But after Jackson's questions and Vivian's reaction, she needed answers. "I just want to know why this thing's got everyone acting weird," she said, her voice quieter than she meant. "It's just a piece of jewelry, right?" Keisha shot her a look, one eyebrow raised. "Girl, you know it's more than that. You've been clutching that thing like it's your lifeline since the gala. Let's see what Marla says." The shop, called Moon and Moss, was a cozy nook squeezed between a vegan cafe and an art gallery. The air inside smelled of sage and lavender, shelves lined with crystals, incense and hand-painted masks inspired by African diaspora art. A beaded curtain rustled as Marla Tate emerged, a wiry black woman in her 60s with wild gray curls and eyes that seemed to see too much. She wore a flowing kaftan, its bright Ankara print catching the light, and a stack of bangles jangled on her wrist. "Well now," Marla said, her voice warm but sharp, like she was sizing Nia up. "Keisha said you've got a mystery on your hands. Let's see it." Nia hesitated, then extended her wrist, the bracelet glinting under the shop's soft lights. Marla's eyes widened, and she grabbed Nia's hand with surprising strength, tracing the carvings with her finger. "Where'd you get this?" she asked, her tone urgent. "Someone gave it to me," Nia said, her stomach twisting. "A friend a few months ago." "Why?" Marla didn't answer right away. She turned the bracelet, her lips moving silently as if reading something in the intricate patterns. Then she looked up, her gaze pinning Nia in place. "This ain't no trinket, child. It's a Horizon Enterprises heirloom, passed down through their family for generations. Only the direct line wears this. Nobody else." Nia's mouth went dry. "Horizon Enterprises? The tech company?" Marla nodded, releasing her hand, but not her stare. "Big rival to Apex Innovations back in the day, till they got crushed about 20 years ago. Nasty business, takeovers, secrets, the works. This bracelet, it's a mark of their bloodline. And I'm telling you, you've got their blood. I see it in your energy, your dreams. You're no random girl. You're their lost daughter." Nia laughed, the sound brittle. "That's crazy. I'm just a yoga teacher from Atlanta. My parents adopted me, sure, but I don't know anything about some tech dynasty." Marla leaned forward, her voice dropping. "You think I'm playing? Those dreams you're having, the house," the woman's voice, "they're memories, Nia. Your soul's trying to tell you who you are. That bracelet's waking something up." Nia's head spun. She wanted to bolt, to laugh it off and go back to her normal life, but Marla's words hooked into her, tugging at the edges of her doubt. The dreams, the bracelet, the way Vivian had looked at her. It was too much to be coincidence. She glanced at Keisha, who was wide-eyed, clearly eating this up. "You believe this?" Nia asked. Keisha shrugged, her grin fading. "I don't know, but Marla's never wrong about this stuff. Maybe it's worth digging into." Nia left the shop in a daze, the bracelet feeling like a weight she couldn't shake. Marla's words echoed in her head. "You're their lost daughter." It was ridiculous, but as she climbed back into the car, the dreams flashed again, sharper now, a woman's hand, dark like hers, slipping the bracelet onto a tiny wrist. She shivered, despite the Miami heat. Back at Apex Innovations, Jackson Reed was trying to focus on a contract proposal, but his mind kept drifting to Nia Carter, the yoga instructor with the quick smile and the bracelet that nagged at him. He'd seen something like it before, in old company files, something tied to Horizon Enterprises, the rival his family had buried 2 decades ago. But it wasn't just the bracelet. It was her. The way she moved, the way she'd looked at him like she knew him, even if she hadn't said it. He'd felt it too, a spark that hadn't faded since that night in Atlanta. His phone buzzed, pulling him out of his thoughts. It was a text from Vivian. Board meeting moved to tomorrow. Be ready. He frowned, sensing her usual maneuvering. Vivian had been too quiet since the workshop, and that was never a good sign. He pushed the phone aside and stood, pacing to the window. Miami's skyline glittered below, but it didn't calm him. He needed to see Naya again, to figure out why she was under his skin. On impulse, he called his assistant. The yoga instructor from the workshop, Nia Carter. Get me her contact info. I want her back for a follow-up session. Another session? His assistant asked, surprised. Vivian's already grumbling about the budget. Tell Vivian it's my call, Jaxon said, his tone final. He hung up, a faint smile tugging at his lips. He wasn't sure what he was chasing, but he wasn't ready to let Nia slip away again. Naya was back in her hotel room, a modest spot near South Beach, when her phone pinged with an email from Apex Innovations. They wanted her to stay in Miami a few more days to design a full wellness program for their employees. The pay was generous, enough to cover Soulflow's rent for months, and it came with a personal note from Jaxon Reed. Your session was a hit. We could use your expertise. Join me for dinner to discuss? Her heart skipped. Dinner with Jaxon Reed, the man who'd turned her world upside down 3 months ago. She should say no, pack her bags, and get back to Atlanta before things got messier. But Marla's words, the dreams, and the pull she felt toward Jaxon made her hesitate. She texted Keisha, who was out chasing a story. Apex wants me to stay. Jaxon asked me to dinner. What do I do? Keisha's reply was instant. Girl, go. He's hot, rich, and into you. What's the worst that could happen? Nia groaned, tossing her phone onto the bed. The worst was that she'd fall for him, and she wasn't sure her heart could take another hit. But she typed a quick reply to Jaxon. Dinner sounds good. Let me know when and where. That night, Jaxon took her to a rooftop restaurant overlooking the ocean. The kind of place with linen napkins and waiters who refilled your water before you asked. Naya felt out of place in her borrowed maxi dress, its vibrant teal fabric clinging to her curves. But Jackson's easy smile put her at ease. He was in a linen shirt, sleeves rolled up, his dark hair catching the breeze. The city lights sparkled below, and the air smelled of salt and possibility. You clean up nice, he said, leaning back in his chair, his eyes tracing her with a warmth that made her skin tingle. You're not so bad yourself, she shot back, sipping her wine to hide her nerves. Though I'm still not sure why a CEO cares about yoga. He chuckled, the sound low and warm. Maybe I just like the instructor. Her stomach flipped, and she looked away, focusing on the ocean to steady herself. They talked for hours, the conversation flowing like it had at the gala. He asked about her studio, her love for Afrobeat, the way she built Soulflow from nothing. She asked about Apex, his life in Miami, and caught glimpses of the man behind the title. A guy who loved old jazz records and missed his dad, who died too young. The more they talked, the harder it was to ignore the pull between them, the way his hand brushed hers when he passed her the bread, the way his eyes lingered on her lips. After dinner, they walked along the beach, the sand cool under her bare feet, her heels dangling from her hand. The waves crashed softly, and the moonlight caught the bracelet on her wrist. Jaxon noticed, his voice quiet. You didn't tell me the real story about that bracelet, did you? Naya tensed, her instinct to deflect warring with the urge to be honest. It's complicated, she said finally. I'm still figuring it out. He stopped, turning to face her, the ocean stretching behind him. I'm Nia. I don't know what it is about you, but I can't get you out of my head. That night in Atlanta, it wasn't just a night for me. Her breath caught, her heart pounding. She wanted to run, to protect herself, but his eyes held her there, steady and sure. Before she could think, she stepped closer, her hand finding his. Jaxon, I'm scared, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. But I feel it too. He closed the distance, his hand cupping her face, and kissed her. It was slow at first, tentative, then deeper, a hungry edge to it that sent heat pooling in her core. She melted into him, her fingers gripping his shirt, the world fading to just them. His hands slid to her waist, pulling her closer, and she felt the strength of him, the need that mirrored her own. When they pulled apart, breathless, she laughed, the sound shaky. "Your trouble," she said, echoing Keisha's words from the gala. "Only for you," he murmured, his forehead resting against hers. They walked back to his car, hands intertwined, the night wrapping around them like a promise. But as they drove back to her hotel, Nia's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Leave Miami. You don't belong here." Her blood ran cold, the bracelet suddenly heavy on her wrist. She glanced at Jaxon, his profile strong in the dim light, and decided not to tell him. Not yet, but as they said goodnight, his lips brushing hers one last time, she knew the storm was coming, and she wasn't sure she was ready. The hotel room in Miami was a cocoon of shadows, the only light a faint glow from the streetlights seeping through the blinds. Nia Carter paced the worn carpet, her bare feet silent against the hum of the air conditioner. The silver bracelet on her wrist felt like a shackle, its intricate carvings catching the dim light as she moved. The anonymous text from last night. "Leave Miami. You don't belong here." Burned in her mind, each word a needle pricking her nerves. She'd barely slept, her dreams a tangle of the big house, the woman's lullaby, and Vivian Caldwell's cold, predatory stare. Marla Tate's voice haunted her. "You're their lost daughter." It sounded like a fairy tale, but the fear in her gut was all too real. Keisha Brooks was sprawled on the pull-out couch, her soft snores a stark contrast to Nia's racing pulse. Keisha's phone lay abandoned on the coffee table, its screen dark after hours of scrolling. Nia envied her friend's ability to tune out the world, but she couldn't shake the dread that had settled in her bones. She glanced at her own phone, Jaxon Reed's name glowing on the screen. His kiss on the beach last night had been a wildfire, his hands pulling her close, his voice a low vow that made her believe in something beyond her fears. But telling him about the text felt like stepping off a cliff. What if he thought she was overreacting? What if he saw her as trouble he didn't need? A faint scuff outside the door froze her mid-step. Footsteps, slow and heavy, echoed in the hallway, pausing just beyond the threshold. Her heart slammed against her ribs, the air suddenly thick. She crept to the door, her breath shallow, and peered through the peephole. The hallway was dark, but a shadow shifted, broad and menacing, under the crack of light. Panic clawed at her chest. She shook Keisha awake, her whisper sharp. "Keisha, someone's out there." Keisha groaned, rubbing her eyes. "It's probably a drunk tourist, Nia. Go back to bed." The doorknob jiggled, a soft creak that sent Nia's pulse into overdrive. She grabbed a ceramic lamp from the nightstand, its cord dangling as she held it like a club. "This isn't a tourist," she hissed, her voice trembling. Keisha sat up, finally alert, her eyes wide as the shadow lingered. Nia's phone buzzed, the vibration loud in the tense silence. She nearly dropped the lamp, her hands shaking as she checked the screen. It was Jaxon. "Can't sleep. I'm outside. You up?" Relief crashed through her, but fear kept her grip tight on the lamp. She flung the door open, weapon raised, and there he was, Jaxon Reed in a faded hoodie and jeans, his dark hair mussed, his eyes widening at the sight of her. "Whoa, Nia, what the hell?" he said, hands up, a startled laugh breaking through. "You planning to knock me out?" The hallway was empty now, the shadow gone, but Nia's heart still raced. She lowered the lamp, her breath uneven. I heard someone, she said, pulling him inside and slamming the door. Footsteps, the door rattling. I thought. Jackson's amusement faded, his gaze sharpening. He locked the door, his broad frame filling the small room. Keisha stood, arms crossed, her braids swinging. Okay, Mr. CEO, what's the deal? Why's my girl acting like she's in a thriller movie? Naya shot Keisha a look, then turned to Jaxon, her voice unsteady. I got a text last night. Told me to leave Miami like a threat, and just now someone was out there. I'm not making this up. Jackson's jaw tightened, his hand brushing her arm, grounding her. You're not crazy, he said, his voice low and firm. Stay here. I'm checking it out. No, Jaxon, she started, but he was already moving, slipping into the hallway with a quiet intensity that made her stomach twist. Keisha grabbed her hand, whispering, Girl, you didn't tell me about a text. Spill. I didn't want to freak you out, Naya said, her eyes glued to the door. But it's tied to this bracelet, I know it. Marla said I might be some lost heir to Horizon Enterprises. Keisha's mouth dropped open. Horizon? The tech giant that went under? Naya, that's wild. Jaxon returned, his expression dark. Nobody's there, but the fire exit was propped open. We're not staying here. He looked at Naya, his eyes fierce. Pack your stuff. You're coming to Apex with me. It's secure, and I've got files we can dig through. Nia's instinct was to push back. She'd always handled her own problems, but the memory of that shadow silenced her. Okay, she said, grabbing her bag. Keisha, never one to miss a beat, threw her things together, muttering, This better come with breakfast. They piled into Jackson's Tesla, the Miami night a blur of neon signs and rain-slicked streets. Nia sat in the passenger seat, the bracelet heavy on her wrist, her mind racing. Jackson's hand rested on the gear shift, close enough that she could feel his warmth, and it steadied her, even as fear gnawed at her edges. She stole a glance at him, his profile strong in the dashboard's glow, and wondered how she'd gone from a yoga teacher to someone caught in a storm she didn't understand. The Apex Innovations Tower was a fortress of glass and steel, its lobby deserted at this hour. Jaxon led them through a side entrance, his keycard buzzing them into an elevator that shot up to his office on the top floor. The space was sleek. Marble floors, a glass desk, a wall of screens, but personal touches softened it. A vinyl record player with a stack of jazz albums, a photo of Jaxon with an older man, his dad, smiling on a fishing boat. Nia's heart twinged at the sight, a reminder that Jaxon carried his own ghosts. Keisha flopped onto a leather couch, kicking off her sneakers. All right, this is bougie. I'm crashing here. Y'all do your detective thing, but wake me for coffee. She pulled a throw blanket over herself, already half asleep. Naya managed a small smile, but it faded as Jaxon turned to her, his eyes searching. You okay? He asked, stepping closer, his voice soft but weighted. No, she admitted, her fingers tracing the bracelet. Jaxon, I'm scared. That text, the dreams, Marla saying I'm some lost heir, it's too much, and now someone's following me. He closed the distance, his hand cupping her face, his thumb brushing her cheek. You're not alone in this, he said, his voice a low rumble. Whatever's going on, we'll figure it out. Together. The air between them crackled, the fear in her chest giving way to something warmer, more urgent. She looked up at him, his dark eyes holding hers, and felt the pull that had started at the gala, stronger now, undeniable. Why do you care so much? She whispered, her voice trembling. You could walk away, Jaxon. This isn't your fight. He leaned in, his forehead resting against hers, his breath warm on her lips. Because I can't walk away from you, Nia. Not then, not now. You're under my skin, and I'm not letting you go. Her heart stuttered, and before she could think, she kissed him. It was fierce, desperate, a collision of fear and need. His hands slid to her waist, pulling her against him, and she melted into his strength, her fingers gripping his hoodie. The kiss deepened, a hungry edge to it that set her blood on fire. He lifted her onto the edge of his desk, papers scattering, and she wrapped her legs around him, feeling the heat of his body, the urgency in his touch. It wasn't just desire. It was a lifeline, a way to hold on to something solid in a world that was crumbling. His lips trailed to her neck, and she gasped, her hands tangling in his hair, the room spinning. When they pulled apart, breathless, she laughed, the sound shaky. "You're gonna get us in trouble," she said, her voice low, her fingers still tracing his jaw. "Worth it," he murmured, his grin boyish, but his eyes dark with want. The moment shattered when his phone buzzed, a security alert flashing on the screen. He grabbed it, his face hardening. "Someone triggered a motion sensor in the parking garage," he said, his tone clipped. "Stay here with Keisha. I'm checking it out." "Jaxon, don't," she started. But he was already moving, grabbing a flashlight from his desk and heading for the door. "Be careful," she called after him, her voice tight. He paused, looking back with a small, reassuring smile. "Always am." The door clicked shut, and Nia stood frozen, the bracelet a cold weight on her wrist. Keisha stirred on this couch, mumbling, "He's got it bad for you, girl." But Nia barely heard her, her mind racing. The text, the shadow, Marla's words, it was all connected, and Vivian Caldwell was at the center. She sank into Jaxon's chair, her eyes landing on a filing cabinet in the corner. If there were answers, they were here, buried in Apex's past. She crossed the room, her hands trembling as she opened the cabinet. Files labeled Horizon Acquisitions stared back, thick with secrets. She pulled one out, flipping through memos, contracts, and bank transfers, her heart pounding. Then she found it, a faded photo of a baby, her dark skin glowing under a hospital light, a silver bracelet on her tiny wrist. Beneath it, a note in sharp, slanted handwriting. Child removed, 1999. VC. Nia's breath caught, her vision blurring. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice breaking. "It's me. Vivian did this." The door opened, and Jaxon stepped back in, his face grim. "False alarm," he said, then stopped, seeing the photo in her hands. "Nia, what is that?" She held it up, her hand shaking. "This is me, Jaxon. I'm the Horizon heir. And your aunt, she took me." His eyes widened, and he crossed to her, taking the photo. "VC Vivian Caldwell," he said, his voice low, a storm brewing in his expression. "She's behind this. Everything." Nia nodded, tears stinging her eyes. "She knows who I am, and she wants me gone." Jaxon pulled her into his arms, his embrace fierce. "She's not touching you," he said, his voice a vow. "We're ending this, Nia. Together." But as she clung to him, the bracelet cold against her skin, Nia felt the weight of a truth she wasn't ready to face. Her past wasn't just a mystery. It was a war, and she was standing on the front line. Nia Carter stood in Jaxon Reed's office at Apex Innovations, the Miami skyline glittering through the floor-to-ceiling windows, but her world was collapsing inward. The faded photo in her hand, a baby with her dark skin, a silver bracelet on a tiny wrist, felt like a grenade, its pin already pulled. The handwritten note beneath it, child removed, 1999. VC was a blade to her heart. Vivian Caldwell, the woman who'd orchestrated her kidnapping, who'd stolen her from her family, her legacy. Nia's knees buckled, and she sank into Jaxon's leather chair, the bracelet on her wrist a burning weight. Jaxon crouched beside her, his hand steady on her shoulder, his dark eyes fierce with a mix of anger and protectiveness. "Nia," he said, his voice low, grounding her. "We've got her. This is proof. Vivian can't hide from this." Nia's breath hitched, tears stinging her eyes. "Proof of what, Jaxon? That my whole life's a lie? That I was supposed to be someone else?" Her voice cracked, the weight of Marla Tate's words. "You're their lost daughter," crashing down. She'd been a yoga teacher scraping by in Atlanta, proud of her hustle, her community. Now, she was the heir to Horizon Enterprises, a tech empire crushed by the family of the man she was falling for. It was too much, too fast. Jaxon's hand slid to her cheek, his thumb brushing away a tear. "Your life's not a lie," he said, his tone fierce. "You're Nia Carter, the strongest woman I know. This doesn't change that. It just gives you a bigger fight." She leaned into his touch, her heart a storm of fear and gratitude. His belief in her was a lifeline, but the truth was a tidal wave, and she was barely keeping her head above water. "What do we do now?" she whispered. "We dig deeper," Jaxon said, standing and pulling her to her feet. "There's more in these files, something that tells us why Vivian went this far, and then we take her down." They dove back into the Horizon acquisition files, the office filled with the rustle of paper and the soft hum of a jazz record Jaxon had put on to steady their nerves. Keisha Brooks, sprawled on the couch, had woken up and joined them, her usual humor replaced by a quiet focus as she sorted through documents. "This is some corporate espionage crap," she muttered, flipping through a ledger. "Y'all's family plays dirty, Reed." Jaxon shot her a look, but there was no heat in it. "Tell me about it." Nia's hands trembled as she opened a folder marked Confidential. Inside was a leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed but intact. The first entry was dated 1998, written in a flowing script. "My daughter is my light. She'll carry Horizon forward, no matter what they try to take." Nia's breath caught. The handwriting matched the lullaby in her dreams, the voice of a woman she'd never known but felt in her bones. Her mother. She turned the pages, her heart pounding, and found an entry from 1999. "They're coming for us. Langston's people. Vivian Caldwell. Won't stop. I've hidden the prototype in the vault, locked with her bracelet. If I don't make it, she'll find it. My Nia." Nia's vision blurred, tears spilling onto the journal. "Jaxon," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "This is my mother's. She knew they'd take me. And this—" She held up her wrist, the bracelet glinting. "It's a key to some kind of vault." Jaxon's eyes widened as he took the journal, scanning the page. "A prototype," he said, his voice tight. Horizon was working on something big, AI tech that could have changed the industry. If it's still out there, it's worth billions. No wonder Vivian wanted you gone. Keisha whistled, leaning over. "So Nia's not just an heiress, she's got the key to a tech goldmine? Damn, girl, you're a whole plot twist." Nia managed a shaky laugh, but the weight of her mother's words pressed down. Her mother had fought for her, had hidden something to secure her future, and Vivian had stolen it all. Anger flared, hot and sharp, cutting through her fear. "We need to find that vault," she said, her voice steadying. "And we need to stop Vivian before she tries anything else." Jaxon nodded, his hand finding hers, squeezing gently. "We will. But we need more than this journal. We need to confront her. Publicly, where she can't wiggle out." The door buzzed, and Nia tensed, but it was only Jaxon's assistant, dropping off coffee. As the door closed, another figure stepped into the office, Eleanor Reed, Jaxon's grandmother. She was a striking woman in her 70s, her silver hair swept into a chignon, her eyes sharp as cut glass. She carried a cane, but her posture was regal, commanding the room without a word. "Jaxon," Eleanor said, her voice crisp. "What's this I hear about you digging through old files at 3 a.m? Nia's heart sank. Eleanor was a wild card. Jaxon respected her, but she was part of the family that had crushed Horizon. Jaxon stood, his expression guarded. "Grandma, we found something. About Horizon Enterprises and Nia." Eleanor's gaze shifted to Nia, lingering on the bracelet. Her face softened, a flicker of something like guilt crossing her features. "You're her, aren't you?" she said, her voice low. "The Grayson girl." Nia's breath caught. "You knew?" Eleanor sighed, leaning on her cane. "I suspected. 20 years ago I heard whispers about a child, but Vivian swore it was handled. Adoption, clean and legal. I didn't ask questions. I should have." She looked at Nia, her eyes heavy. "I'm sorry, child. I let my family's ambition blind me." Nia's throat tightened, anger and grief warring inside her. "Why didn't you stop her?" "I was fighting to keep Apex alive," Eleanor said, her voice steady but laced with regret. "We were bleeding money, and Horizon was a threat. I trusted Vivian to handle the details. I was wrong." Jaxon stepped forward, his voice hard. "Grandma, Vivian kidnapped Nia. She's behind the threats now, trying to keep her quiet. We've got proof." Eleanor's eyes narrowed, a spark of the old fire returning. "Then we end this. Call a board meeting. Tomorrow. Vivian won't slink away from this one." Nia's head spun, but Eleanor's resolve steadied her. She wasn't alone. Not with Jaxon, not with Eleanor, not even with Keisha, who was watching wide-eyed from the couch. But the board meeting loomed like a battlefield, and Nia wasn't sure she was ready to step into it. The next morning, Nia stood in front of a mirror in Jaxon's penthouse, smoothing a borrowed dress Keisha had insisted she wear, a vibrant kente-patterned wrap dress that hugged her curves and made her feel like a warrior. The bracelet glinted on her wrist, no longer just a trinket, but a symbol of her mother's fight, her own strength. She'd spent the night preparing with Jaxon, rehearsing her speech, memorizing the evidence, the photo, the journal, the note. But her stomach churned with nerves. She was a yoga teacher, not a corporate avenger. What if the board dismissed her? What if Vivian twisted it all? Jaxon appeared behind her, his reflection in the mirror a steady presence. He was in a tailored suit, his dark hair neat, but his eyes were soft, locked on hers. "You've got this," he said, his hands resting on her shoulders. "You're not just fighting for yourself, Nia. You're fighting for your mom, for Horizon, and I'm right here with you." She turned, her hand finding his, the warmth of his touch calming her. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if they don't believe me?" "Then we make them," he said, his voice fierce. He pulled her close, his lips brushing her forehead, and for a moment the world was just them, a quiet strength in the eye of the storm. "You're stronger than you know, Nia Carter." She smiled, her heart swelling, and kissed him softly, a promise to hold on to. "Let's do this." The Apex Innovations boardroom was a sleek, intimidating space, glass walls, a long mahogany table, and a dozen executives in suits that cost more than Nia's rent. Eleanor sat at the head, her cane resting against her chair, her presence a quiet command. Jaxon stood beside Nia, his hand brushing hers as they entered, a subtle anchor. Vivian Caldwell strode in last, her silver hair gleaming, her designer suit sharp as a blade. Her son, Malik, slouched beside her, his smirk fading when he saw Nia's bracelet. The air crackled with tension, every eye on Nia as she stepped forward, the journal and photo clutched in her hands. Jaxon spoke first, his voice cutting through the room. "We're here to address a crime, one that's been buried for 20 years. Vivian Caldwell kidnapped Nia Carter, the heir to Horizon Enterprises to secure Apex's takeover. We have proof. He slammed the journal on the table, the photo beside it, and the room erupted in murmurs. Vivian's face went pale, but she recovered quickly, her laugh sharp. "This is absurd," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Some yoga teacher's fantasy? You're wasting our time, Jaxon." Nia's blood boiled, her fear burning away. She stepped forward, holding up the bracelet, her voice steady. "This was mine when I was taken. My mother's journal names you Vivian. You stole my life to bury Horizon. You can't lie your way out of this." Vivian's eyes narrowed, but Malik shifted, his smirk gone. "Mom, maybe we should—" "Shut up, Malik," Vivian snapped, her composure cracking. She turned to the board, her tone icy. "This girl's a nobody. You're really going to believe her over me?" Eleanor stood, her cane tapping the floor, her voice like steel. "We believe the evidence, Vivian. The photo, the journal, the money trail Jaxon found in your accounts. You've disgraced this family. Nia deserves justice." The board murmured, heads nodding. Vivian lunged forward, her voice a hiss. "You can't prove anything. This is a setup." Malik grabbed her arm, his voice low. "Stop, Mom. It's over." He turned to Jaxon, his expression conflicted. "I've got texts. Her orders to scare Nia off. I'll turn them over." Vivian's face contorted, betrayal cutting deep. "You ungrateful," she started, but security stepped in, summoned by Eleanor's nod. They escorted Vivian and Malik out, her screams echoing down the hall. The boardroom fell silent, the weight of the moment settling like dust. Eleanor turned to Nia, her eyes soft. "You're Horizon's heir, Nia. We'll restore what's yours, assets, shares, everything. You belong here." Nia's knees weakened, but Jaxon's arm steadied her, his warmth a quiet strength. She nodded, tears spilling over, overwhelmed by the truth, the victory, the loss of a mother she'd never know. As the board dispersed, Jaxon pulled her aside, his voice low. "You did it, Nia. You're incredible." She looked up at him, her heart full. "We did it," she said, her voice breaking. "But Jaxon, what happens now?" He smiled, brushing a curl from her face. "Now, we build something new. Together." As they stood there, the city sprawling below, Nia felt the bracelet's weight shift, not a burden anymore, but a promise. Vivian was gone, but the vault, her mother's prototype, and a future she'd never imagined were waiting. With Jaxon by her side, she was ready to face it all. Nia Carter stood on the balcony of Jaxon Reed's Miami penthouse, the city sprawling below like a sea of stars. The warm breeze carried the scent of salt and jasmine, tugging at her curls as she leaned against the railing. The silver bracelet on her wrist, once a mystery, now felt like a part of her, a link to her mother, to Horizon Enterprises, to a legacy she was only beginning to understand. A month had passed since the boardroom showdown that brought Vivian Caldwell down, and Nia's life had shifted in ways she'd never imagined. She twisted the bracelet, its carvings catching the moonlight, and let herself breathe. For the first time in weeks, she felt like she could. Inside, the penthouse was alive with soft music, John Coltrane's saxophone weaving through the air, and the clink of glasses from a small gathering. Jaxon had insisted on hosting a dinner to celebrate not just the legal victory over Vivian, but Nia's new role as CEO of Horizon Enterprises. The board had voted unanimously to split Horizon's assets from Apex's holdings, restoring what was hers. And Nia had thrown herself into rebuilding the company her mother had dreamed of. It was daunting. Board meetings, investor pitches, tech specs she barely understood. But she was learning, fueled by a fire she hadn't known she had. Jaxon stepped onto the balcony, his presence a quiet warmth at her side. He was in a linen shirt, sleeves rolled up, his dark hair slightly mussed from the evening's laughter. He slipped an arm around her waist, pulling her close, and she leaned into him, her head resting against his chest. "You're quiet tonight," he said, his voice low, a smile in it. "Everything okay?" She tilted her head to look at him, his eyes soft in the glow of the city. "Just thinking," she said, her fingers tracing the bracelet. "A month ago, I was stressing over yoga schedules and a busted AC. Now I'm running a tech company and standing here with you. It's a lot." He chuckled, the sound vibrating through her. "You're handling it like a pro. I'm the one sweating, trying to keep up with you." She laughed, swatting his arm. "Liar. You were born for this CEO life." "Maybe," he said, his tone turning serious. "But you, Naya, you were born for something bigger. I see it every day." Her heart swelled, and she turned in his arms, facing him fully. The past month had been a whirlwind. Court hearings, late-night strategy sessions, and stolen moments like this, where the world faded to just them. Vivian's trial had been swift. She faced charges for kidnapping and fraud, her empire of lies crumbling in a Miami courtroom. Malik, her son, had cut a deal, turning over evidence for a lighter sentence, and vanished from Apex overnight. Naya felt no pity for them. They'd tried to erase her, to bury her past for their own gain, and now they were paying the price. But the victory was bittersweet, shadowed by the mother she'd never know, whose journal Nia kept on her nightstand, reading its pages like a prayer. Jaxon had been her rock through it all, his hand in hers during every hearing, his voice steady when hers faltered. He'd pushed her to dream bigger, to see Horizon not just as a company, but as a chance to change lives. She'd hired a team, engineers, marketers, even a few yoga instructors to teach wellness classes for employees, and started planning community programs in Atlanta, blending tech with the soul of her roots. Afrobeat playlists filled Horizon's new office, and Nia's vision was taking shape, a company that innovated but also uplifted, especially for communities like hers. Eleanor Reed, Jackson's grandmother, had become an unexpected ally. The older woman had taken Nia under her wing, inviting her to weekly dinners at her sprawling estate outside Miami. Over plates of shrimp and grits, Eleanor shared stories of Apex's early days, her own fights to keep it afloat, and her regrets about Horizon. "You've got fire, Naya," she'd said one night, her hand patting Nia's. "You and Jaxon are going to do things I never dreamed of." Nia had blushed, still adjusting to being part of something so vast, but Eleanor's warmth made it real. She wasn't just the lost Horizon heir anymore. She was family. The balcony door slid open, and Keisha Brooks poked her head out, her braids swinging, a glass of wine in her hand. "Y'all gonna hide out here all night? Or you coming to join your own party?" she teased, her grin wide. "Folks are asking for the CEO, Nia." Naya laughed, stepping out of Jackson's embrace. I'm coming. Don't drink all the good stuff." Keisha winked. "No promises." She disappeared back inside, her laughter trailing behind. Jaxon caught Naya's hand, pulling her back for a moment. "Before we go in," he said, his voice dropping, "there's something I need to say." Her heart skipped, sensing the shift in his tone. He led her to the edge of the balcony, the city humming below, and turned to face her, his hands framing her face. "Nia Carter," he said, his eyes locked on hers. "You've turned my world upside down. That night at the gala, I didn't know it was you, but I felt it, something real, something I couldn't shake. And now, seeing you fight, seeing you become this incredible woman, I want you with me, always." Her breath caught, her eyes widening as he dropped to one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. The ring inside sparkled, a simple diamond set in a band that echoed the carvings of her bracelet. "Marry me, Nia," he said, his voice steady but thick with emotion, not because of Horizon or Apex, but because I love you. The world tilted, time slowing to the beat of her heart. She stared at him, the man who'd seen her at her most vulnerable and fought for her anyway, who'd made her believe she was enough. Tears spilled over, and she laughed, the sound bright and free. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. "Yes, Jaxon, I'll marry you." He surged to his feet, pulling her into a kiss that was all heat and promise, his arms wrapping her tight. She melted into him, her hands clutching his shirt, the city fading to a distant hum. The kiss deepened, a spark igniting, and when they pulled apart, breathless, she rested her forehead against his, her smile wide. "You're gonna make me cry all my mascara off," she teased. "Worth it," he murmured, his grin boyish, his eyes shining. They rejoined the party, hand in hand, the ring glinting on her finger. Keisha spotted it immediately, letting out a whoop that turned every head. "Oh, hell yes!" she shouted, rushing over to hug Nia. "I called it, didn't I? Y'all are goals!" The guests, Horizon and Apex employees, a few Atlanta friends, and Eleanor, cheered, raising glasses in a toast. Eleanor caught Nia's eye, her smile warm, a nod of pride that made Nia's chest ache. The night spun on, filled with laughter, music, and the kind of joy Nia hadn't known she could hold. Later, as the party wound down, Nia slipped back to the balcony, needing a moment to breathe. Jaxon joined her, his arm around her, and they stood in comfortable silence, the city alive below. But a shadow lingered in Nia's mind. Marla Tate's cryptic warning about a Horizon vault, a power beyond money. She and Jaxon had talked about it, half joking about treasure hunts, but the bracelet felt heavier now, like it was waiting for something. Her phone buzzed and she glanced at it, expecting a congratulatory text. Instead, it was Marla. "You've claimed your truth, but the vault's still out there. It's not just tech, it's power. Only you can open it. Watch your back." Nia's stomach twisted, the joy of the night tinged with unease. She showed Jaxon the text, and he frowned, pulling her closer. "Whatever it is, we'll find it," he said, his voice steady. "Together." She nodded, leaning into him, the bracelet a quiet promise on her wrist. The vault was a mystery, a challenge for another day. But for now, she had Jaxon, a new family, and a purpose she'd never dreamed of. She'd come to Miami for a job, a quick paycheck to save her studio. She was leaving with a fiancé, a legacy, and a fire in her soul. Here's the thing about life's wildest moments, the ones that scare you, that break you open. They can lead you somewhere extraordinary. Nia's story started with a reckless night, a bracelet, and a leap into the unknown. It ended with love, justice, and a legacy reclaimed. Sometimes letting go, even for a moment, shows you who you're meant to be. Nia and Jaxon proved that, turning a spark into a flame that burned bright enough to light their way. As they stood there, wrapped in each other, the future stretched wide and open. There'd be challenges, the vault, Horizon's growth, the weight of their new life. But they'd face it together. Nia had found her place, her power, and the man who saw her, truly saw her, through it all. It was messy, unexpected, and perfect in its own way. If you loved Nia and Jaxon's journey, from a gala's fleeting spark to a love that conquered all, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below. What did you think of their story? Want to see what's next for that mysterious vault? Thank you for joining me on this ride. Stay tuned for more stories that'll steal your heart and keep you guessing.